left my phone on display, better put that away. Pretty bored of not being able to drive this thing, and pretty bored of the garage being a mess. So let's just throw some of these parts back at the car and get it on its way. Good news, I did get some ratchet spanners for Christmas, so that's a lovely bonus. Now the exhaust is actually at the minute hanging down, so I'd quite like to just get that off, being an issue, and just put the manifolds back on, I think, because I just don't like the exhaust hanging freely anymore. I have currently got it sat on a jack, so I should be able to jack the manifolds as the downpipes up to meet the manifold, and should make bolting it up a little bit easier, hopefully. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. Also around this side I've got the thermostat housing to reattach, which is something that's nice and easy to do and just get out of the way at this stage. So I'll just put in the 2 bolts with a new gasket, and there we go. Before putting the manifolds on, I also fitted these new crush rings, or whatever they're called. Manifolds are a little bit fiddly to fit, and it did take me a little while. And the first time I was a bit silly and forgot to put the manifold gaskets on. So I had to kind of just take them off again and do it all again. Right, have it mostly in position now. Just one bolt without its collar, just holding it on, and one bolt on each of the cats to hold it up. I'm just going to bolt it all down now, and hopefully that will be okay. The torque rating I need is 45 to 60 Newton meters, so it's a bit of a range. I'm going to go for 53 in the middle, and that should be good enough. So just put all the nuts and spacers, collars, whatever you want to call them on, and tighten them down to be roughly where they need to be, and then torque them up. Since it's 45 to 60 for the exhaust, I've gone for 52, somewhere in the middle, thought that would make sense. And I'm going to clamp them down in a similar kind of pattern to the head bolts, so something like over there, over there, over there, over there, over there, over there, that kind of thing. Since I didn't have the proper cam alignment tool, I did take some detailed measurements with a vernier caliper before taking the timing chain off previously. Now, in order to just check that it's definitely vertical, I also made a template up to try and help me get it on the way. But this is definitely the bit that I was most nervous about. Now, looking at it from the top here, all the slack needs to be on the left side of this image, or if you're looking at it from the driver's seat, the right hand side of the engine. That's where all the slack needs to be, so when the tensioner is fitted, it will take up the slack there. Now the fiddly bit obviously with this is trying to hold it all in place and get a bolt in without, heavens forbid, dropping it down into the engine casing, because that would just be terrible at this point. So I was a bit nervous. Just focus on getting 1 or 2 bolts into these cam verniers at this stage, and then the other 2, when you start rotating the engine by hand, can go in the bottom. Okay, so I've got the first 2 bolts in. You want to make sure you've got no slack on this other side of the chain. You want all the slack, or the loose chain, to be on this side. Next job, I'll put the other one on. But you do need to leave just a little slack in the top for the top tensioner. So whether I install that now, which I think is a good idea, and fitting the exhaust cam vernier, it's the same as fitting the intake one. It just requires a bit of fiddling. You've just got to get the holes aligned with the cogs. Obviously there's a bit of movement in the way these things can be set up, because they're on like a spline in the middle, so you can change it if it wasn't aligned before perfectly, but it happened to line up on mine first time. Pretty lucky. Same as on the intake side, just put the 2 bolts in that you can access at the top. Interestingly, these are actually a 9/16 rather than a 13 or 14 mil. So you will need an imperial socket for this. Must be a bit of a leftover from the older days of Jaguar. This is the newer style tensioner, and just be careful how you hold it because this part can fall out. It has an arrow upwards, so obviously bear in mind its orientation. I've fitted a new O-ring and a gasket. Before installing the tensioner, you need to get it right back onto its park position, and basically you just push it in and it ratchets down. Hopefully once there's oil pressure in the engine it should fire off. That's got it back into its park position. It's right the way in now, so hopefully you can see. Just wind it back in by pushing it. Make sure the arrow and the orientation is lined up the same. And then it's just a case of bolting it in with a 10mm socket. Remove the bit of tape that stopped me dropping nuts and stuff in there, and crisps, and install the cam dizzy, what Simi called it. Now, reassuringly, it seems to be bolting in exactly the same place that I took it out from, and showing the dot in the middle. That dot means top dead centre, and it means that I probably have everything back where it should be. So even though the cams have some oil on them anyway, they are oily, I thought now was a decent time just to pour oil all over the cams and on the chain, just so when I start turning it over, there's nothing that's dry, basically. Just it's a good idea to do this, just don't really want to get it down the spark plug holes, so just be really careful not to get down the plug holes. Thought it'd be a good idea as well to just rotate the engine a couple of times just to make sure there's no knocks and noises that shouldn't be there, make sure there's no valves hitting pistons, etc. Of course, when the engine was upside down, I added the remaining 2 bolts and locking tabs onto the cam verniers. First bump over on the key. No spark, just to check to make sure everything is turning over okay. Though they were okay, they were in the kit, so I decided to replace the spark plug gaskets and the gasket around the outside of the cam cover. I have to admit that installing the cam cover was a bit more of a pig than I was anticipating. I was basically, the main issue I had, and I had to do quite a few takes with this, was keeping the gasket in place. So every time I put it on, these semicircles at the back were knocked off by the cam bearings or something like that, or the wires got in the way, and it was a bit of a pig, but I did get there in the end. I bolted it all down, which is not that exciting, but a necessary step, and that's about the lot of that. Alright, bolted all them down. I didn't show that because it takes ages and it's not very interesting. So coils, spark plugs, coils, and then wire up, and fingers crossed it might bark off. Right, so I stuck in some spark plugs, and I'm just going to also install the wires for the coils and put them in the plastic clips, and then obviously finally install the coils themselves. I want to see if this thing will run now. Right, it's got some oil in it, some on the dipstick. It's not got loads, but there's 5 or 6 litres, which should be plenty to circulate around the engine. Should be enough just to see if it will go, and if the tensioner will go as well. We'll see if it will run at this point. This is the scary moment of truth that I've kind of been looking forward to, but also dreading. Well, it ran. It sounds like I've got a pretty major exhaust leak, so perhaps I haven't clamped down where the manifold and the cats meet well enough. That'd be my guess. Literally, this car is running, and the loudest thing is the aircon. Apart from the clock, of course, that's the other loudest thing, and that's digital. So I just can't hear it. Silence. It really is a lovely old car to drive. Just floats along. You never feel like you're in a rush to get anywhere. It's the kind of car that you feel more relaxed at the end of your journey than you did at the beginning. I just don't really understand why they're worth so little. They are really quite a lovely car to drive. Really nice car to be in. Everything feels quality. It's just, I guess I like it. It's a nice car. Even handles alright. It drives pretty modern. Feels quite modern to drive. Handles the bumps well. And all these potholed roads that you get around here. Anyway, that kind of completes the work on this car for the time being, hopefully. I don't really want to be bothered to do too much more right now. Please like and subscribe. More videos will be coming on another car shortly.